What do you know about the history of Oakville? Perhaps you've gone down to the lake, south of Lakeshore Road, to see the original settlers' homes. But today we're going to be more adventurous. We're going to go north of Lakeshore Road. I know many of you are familiar with the homes on Trafalgar Road, but we're going to go one block east over to Reynolds Street. That's where our tour is taking us today, down Reynolds and peeking in some of the side streets. There is so much history waiting for us there. Welcome to Annie's house. The plaque on this house does not mention Annie, as it was rented by her from Charles Doughty, but her story must be told. Annie was from Milton, and in May of 1894 she married Duncan Mackay, and they welcomed 4 children into their family. Sadly, 2 did not survive infancy, which was not uncommon then. In June of 1901, Duncan developed peritonitis and died, leaving Annie alone to raise 2 children, William 6 and Mary only 8 months old. In 1911, now a widow, she moved to Oakville and rented this house. Her children by then were aged 16 and 11. In 1916, the Great War was underway and her son enlisted and went to war. What a relief she must have felt at his safe return. In 1920, after years of renting, she was able to purchase a home of her own at 269 Spruce, but happiness was not to be. She was stricken with nephritis and passed away a few months later. Annie's name does not appear on the plaque, but it would simply have read, Annie Mackay, widow. What is missing is her story of courage in facing life, and should be recorded in history books, along with so many other courageous women. Sidney and his brother grew up in a workhouse in England. It was the same workhouse that Oliver Twist was modeled on. They were discharged in 1902 and became part of the hordes of urchins eking out a hand-and-mouth existence on the filthy streets of London. 3,166 boys migrated to Canada between 1884 and 1938 through the Fagan homes. James William Condell Fagan established his first boys' home in England in 1872, and he began immigrating children to Canada in 1884. The Copeland brothers were rescued by James Fagan and found themselves in a ship bound for Canada. They made their way to Oakville, where the older brother, Robert, was married in St. Jude's in 1915. Sidney enlisted and fought in the Great War, and he was injured twice, but survived to return to Canada in 1918. In 1921, he purchased this home, and 2 years later was married and had a son. His occupation was chauffeur, as his lingering war wounds left him unable to do manual work, but he lived on until 1971. From the alleyways of London to the fields of France, Sidney lived a remarkable life of resilience, bravery, and loyalty to his new country. We will continue walking down Reynolds to McDonald Road, where we find 3 interesting homes. John was a farmer in Dufferin Township, born in 1857. He married Mary Lawrence in 1883, and although they had no children of their own, they raised their niece, Effa. Mary died in 1900 and John remarried, but happiness was not to be, as his second wife, Edith Wilson, died of tuberculosis in 1910. After a lifetime of farming, he purchased this house in 1912 and lived in it until his death in 1925. This house was built in the late 1940s and bought by Gerald in 1950. He was employed with the CNR and Helen was a school teacher. Gerald passed away in 1977, and Helen lived on alone until 1998. They were both buried in St. Jude's Cemetery, and there is a tree planted in Georgia Square in their memory. You might be able to find it at the end of the tour. Donald was born in Scotland, and on his discharge from the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders in 1842, he settled in Oakville and married Jane Lang. He became a tailor and was given the position of toll keeper when the road from Fergus to Oakville was built in 1850. The gate was at the corner of 6th Line and Trafalgar Road, where the Sunrise Retirement Home now stands. He purchased this land, and in 1856 this house was built within a year. His daughter Jane Ann married William Street, and after his early death, lived on in the house with her mother. She died 2 years later, leaving her mother with 4 children. The 2 daughters never married, and the house stayed on in the Campbell family for 115 years. The 2-story front facade is unique in town in that it was a Flemish bond brickwork with a cornice of decorative brick and brick eave returns. Back to Reynolds Street. You may be wondering how Reynolds Street got its name. Oakville was no longer a tiny village in the 1850s. Women were wanting more from shopkeepers than staple goods and plain clothing. Charles Reynolds realized this, probably with the help of his wife, and began to place the accent on style rather than necessities. He began selling fancy merchandise. He introduced a new line of millinery, plush bonnets, fancy straw hats, and others with brocaded silks and satins. As well as his wonderful choice of hats, he offered cloaks, gloves, hosiery, ribbons, lace, and edgings were also becoming available to decorate their present wardrobes. He was highly regarded, and the street on which his shop was located, at the corner of what is now Lakeshore and Reynolds, was named after him. A quiet walk south on Reynolds brings us to the old high school. What you see now is the original 1908 high school, built in Gothic style with 3 entrances, one for the staff and one at each end for the students, girls on one end, boys on the other. They were kept apart. Several additions were added over the years, but all that is left now is the original structure. Its fate seems to still be undecided. Continuing down Reynolds, we come to a location that has been used for many different things over the years. This was the site of the original fairgrounds, Victoria Hall, the skating rink, and a cemetery. The fairgrounds were originally an agricultural fair run by local farmers. Then the Oakville Fair developed into a horse show, financed by wealthy horsemen from Toronto and elsewhere. It was eventually moved to a new site across the creek. Originally, the park was named Victoria Park, but was renamed Wallace Park after J.M. Wallace, owner of the basket factory, who paid for new lights for the baseball field. The curling club started out as the skating rink. The original building was torn down, but the curling club carries on. Victoria Hall, which stood in what is now the parking lot, was home to many dances, Teentown High School stage productions, as well as many other youth activities. The town's first moving pictures were also shown here, silent movies, of course. It was also the second site for the town cemetery. The original cemetery was at the southwest corner of Navy and Randall and was moved to this spot. When the school was planned for the same location, the cemetery was moved to what is now Lyons Lane. The removal of remains from the old cemetery on Reynolds Street for reinterment in the new town cemetery was not to be completed for more than 20 years, and the plan to build a new schoolhouse on the old site was never carried out. A bit further along Reynolds, we will find 2 homes that have a connection. George, James, Robert, and John Freestone were 4 of the 7 children of Mary and John Freestone, and they all settled in the area. James, the eldest, was a bricklayer and bought the corner lot in 1877 from William Chisholm. A year later, he bought another parcel of land to the north. He built his first home near Casaloma in Toronto before returning to Oakville. In 1887, he sold the north lot to his brother George, and both houses were built that year. The basic floor plan is Ontario farmhouse, but the outside is an interesting adaptation of Italianate. Take time to look at each house. They are quite unique. The L-shaped corner brick house has had only 4 owners since it was built. Although it is a typical Ontario farmhouse, it shows no evidence of the usual veranda. All 4 brothers stayed close by in Oakville. On the north side of Georgia Square, this house was built in 1910 by Dr. Charles Lusk, who lived next door on Trafalgar Road. In 1920, he sold 204 Trafalgar and moved into this house. It has had only 4 owners. The interesting features of this building include the eaves on both gables, the L-shaped plan, and the wraparound veranda. It represents a simplified design far removed from the overstated Victorian period. On the south side of Georgia Square are 2 of Captain William Wilson's properties. William was one of the 10 Wilson children that the widow had brought out from Ireland. Captain William Wilson owned many lots and houses in Oakville, and upon his death left 16 lots to his heirs. These 2 buildings are 2 of those rental properties. The Francis Matthews Soda Water Works factory operated for several years from the smaller of the 2 buildings. The larger of the 2 buildings is definitely worth having a look. He had a very busy life. He was a ship's captain who took grain and timber across the lake for sale. His brother Robert, also a ship's captain, was remembered for saving hundreds of escaped slaves. The slaves had followed the United States Underground Railway to get as far as the lake, and then Robert carried them to safety on his boat to Oakville. Captain William Wilson was originally married to Margaret Miles, and after her death he married Jane Atkinson. William and Jane had a total of 4 children, 1 from his original marriage to Margaret, and 3 more with Jane. Many of the finely crafted homes in Old Oakville can be attributed to these ship captains who made productive use of their times ashore. These homes were built for themselves as well as the local shipyard workers. The house is believed to have originally been another of William's rental properties. It was situated on the southeast corner of Reynolds and Sumner. It was divided into 2 1/2, was leased to another family. The addition at the back may have been added at this time. Samuel Harris, a carpenter, and his family were living in Milton before purchasing the property in 1879. He and his wife Phoebe lived on one side of the house, while their son Thomas Talbot and his family lived on the other. Thomas was a dentist by trade and conducted his business from this home. A side door was discovered at the west side of the semi, number 328, which is thought to have been a separate entrance for his patients. In 1915, it was eventually swung around to face onto Sumner. In 1910, it was listed as being on Reynolds, and by 1924, it was listed as being on Sumner. Texas can make one do very interesting things. This house was built in the Georgian style and has been divided into 2 houses but still retains its original beauty. After renovations, somewhere in the house is hidden a time capsule with a few items reflecting our world today. Among them is a bottle of 99 Wayne Gretzky whiskey and a request to toast the Leafs on the present homeowner's behalf if they should ever win a Stanley Cup, as they have lost hope of it happening in their lifetime. Samuel was a laborer and likely built this home around 1861 or 1862 for himself, his wife, and their 4 children. He died young in his 30s, soon after building the home. She remarried James Osborne and had 4 more children, only one of the 8 being a son. Like many homes of working men, 338 was built in stages. The original house was 1 story and was not as wide as the present house. The kitchen, pantry, back bedroom, and sun porch were added around the end of the 19th century. The cellar can now be reached by a door from the kitchen, but originally it was entered from out of doors. The original stone steps still exist under the house. There was also a trapdoor entrance to it in the living room. It was built in the very popular Georgian style with the window above the front door and symmetry of the facade. The interior has original plank floors and doors. Not much is known about Horatio Nelson Long. We do know he was a carpenter, and therefore likely built his own house. He practiced this trade in the 1870s in the Oakville area. This beautiful home was built in the Victorian picturesque style. Take your time and enjoy the beauty of this final home on our tour. That's the end of our walk today. I think it would be wise if you went across to Georgia Square to relax. It's a wonderful park. It has 22 different kinds of trees, or you can just sit and enjoy the flowers and the peace and quiet. Thank you for coming with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Looking for more great content like this? Why not check out the Oakville Historical Society website, YouTube channel, or Facebook and Instagram pages?